transfer process, which is just a really sneaky way to get proportions very, very accurate in a drawing. Easy to do, requires a little math, but not too much. I'm terrible at math and I can do it. So it might take a little brain exercise if you are also not a math thinker to do, but it's pretty easy. Then we'll be talking about contour lines and identifying what they are in your picture. Then we'll be doing a transfer of the picture, which is kind of the important part, and then we'll be toning, adding some shade, layering in more value, so just building up the shades in the picture, and then finally adding details. So for the last couple steps, depending on how much time we have, we should have plenty of time to get through everything, but most likely you will get started on the last couple steps and maybe not finish them during the class today. Especially the details, I tend to just take a long time doing those because it's kind of fun for me to just very methodically go through the details. So if you don't finish those details and stuff today, that's totally normal and fine, but you'll have all the skills you need to do them. Okay, so I'll set that to the side. And I'm just gonna like flip this over so you can just see the materials really quick. I'm gonna use drawing pencils. They're nothing crazy. If you have drawing pencils that have these different value ranges, you're welcome to use them, but you can totally get by with a regular pencil. It might be nice to have like one or two just in case like you break one or something. But I'll talk about these really quick. This is a 2H pencil. This is the lightest. This is on the lighter end of the spectrum. This is the lightest pencil I think that I have. It's really good for, oh no, that's a lie. 6H is the lightest one I have. So a 6H pencil is the lightest, and then you kind of go from 4H, which is a teensy bit darker, 2H, which is a little darker, but still very, very light. I like to use a 6H, 4H, or 2H for just the beginning drawing because it lets me draw super light, so I can just erase it no problem. It's a harder pencil lead, it's like harder graphite. So one thing to keep in mind if you're actually with any pencil, but if you're using a 2H, is if you press kind of hard, it will actually leave an indent in the paper. It's a good thing to keep in mind in general that the harder you press, especially when we're doing the grid part, this kind of thing, if you press very hard, you might end up with an indent that might actually show up. So I recommend not pressing super hard, just pressing kind of light. Okay, so there's my 2H, lightest pencil. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about each and every pencil because most people probably are just using a regular pencil, but just so you know. So you have H, what else? I have kind of a disorganized little set here. F is in the middle, and HB, and oops, I might be correct in saying that HB is the same as a 2H pencil. It's kind of right in the middle. So you can tell that that's a little darker. It's a softer lead, so it basically transfers more color. It's not really color, but it transfers more of the lead onto the paper than an H pencil. So an HB, I think, is the same as a 2H. So maybe I'll kind of keep this one aside because I'll use it a lot because I think a lot of people will have that. Then I have my darker shades that are softer lead, so those are the B pencils. So I have a 2B, which is probably going to be pretty close to the HB, and then I go all the way up to 6B, which is quite dark, like that. It's a softer lead. It's really nice for doing like shade, like filling in an area with shade because it has a lot of, like that graphite's really soft, so it transfers really easily. And I'll use these towards the end of the project. I'm not pressing very hard, but it could get really dark if I wanted it to. Just, obviously your pressure makes a difference. Okay, so if you have those pencils, I'd suggest starting off with something HB or something with an H at the end. If you don't have fancy pencils, then just use whatever you got. And most likely it'll be a 2H pencil that's like an HB. Okay, so other stuff. I have just some regular kind of drawing paper. It's actually a little thicker than regular paper. just it's what I had. So you know, you can be using pretty much any paper you want. Even computer paper will work okay. I just have Bristol, which is a little bit thicker drawing paper. I have my erasers. So I have this, just like a, you know, it's just an eraser. But it doesn't, you know, sometimes erasers get all old and weird and they leave like a mark. It doesn't do that, so maybe double check, because that's like the worst thing on earth if your eraser leaves a mark. It's very sad. I also have a pencil sharpener, which I don't know if I put that on the materials list, so hopefully you have enough pencil to survive, or you have a sharpener. I have my ruler here, Great Women of Rulers, Great Women Rulers of Art, or, you know, regular ruler. I also have, I don't actually have a colored pencil. I, for some reason, couldn't find one, but I have some markers that I'm going to use instead. You can use a colored pencil or a marker. It's for something kind of specific that I'll show you later. So it's it'll come up. If you are fancy, you might also have a tortillon or a blending stump, which is basically just kind of like rolled up paper that you can use to blend. So this is, I've used it obviously because there's this little kind of shade at the end, but if it was brand new, it would be all white, and I can just use it to blend in my pencil like that. It's very handy, but really not critical. I don't always use them. This one's kind of gargantuan too. They make them a lot smaller, and you just, if you have one, just make sure it's kind of clean. This one's not totally clean, but it's okay. If you don't have that, no biggie. You can use, I have a tissue here that I'll use also, or a paper towel. And what else do I have? I have eraser pen, which I really like. They're really fun for doing highlights in dark fur or dark whatever. So you can basically use it kind of like a pencil. Sorry, I'm gonna, hopefully this won't shake too much, but we'll see. Kind of a, you know, not something everyone has around the house, but if you do have it, it's kind of fun. If you don't have one, but you have a mechanical pencil with one of these smaller erasers on the end, these actually work almost just as well. That's even a thinner line. So you can get creative and use that kind of stuff. This is all, these little skinny erasers are handy, but you don't need them really. But a regular eraser I'd recommend. Okay, so I think that's all the materials. The one important material we didn't talk about yet is your reference image. So I have just this example that I did before, and you can see that I have mangled the original picture with a 800 number for some reason, and whatever. You can also see the grid kind of through the screen that I used. And you can see my drawing, so it's kind of not totally done. I would probably go in and do a few more details, but it gives you the basic idea. It's also not done on the side here. I intend to actually cut this off at the end before I give it to my friend that owns this dog. So yeah, so this is my example. I'm actually not going to use this picture to show you tonight. I'm going to do something else. Okay, I'm going to put Cooper away in the drawer. This is a picture of my dog who is all black. I mentioned in the email that a dark picture or an all black dark animal can be a little tricky. It is totally doable. So I could draw my dog, but for your sake, I am going to use a different example, because while I could look at this and see the details pretty clearly in front of me, she's dark enough that I think on the screen she's not going to show up really well, like all of the contour lines and details. So if you have a dark animal or a darker picture, as long as you can see the details like well enough, you'll be fine. If it's a really dark picture, like this is actually pretty light. She's very extremely dark. Like usually in a photo, I can't see her face, which is kind of sad, but she's just really dark. Unless you can see her teeth. You can see those, but you can't see anything else usually. So what I would do for a picture of her is, before I print it out, I would probably try to adjust the contrast or the brightness and just brighten it a little bit so I can see more. even if her color kind of isn't real or isn't like what she actually looks like, I just want to be able to see more detail. So if you have a super dark animal or a dark picture, but it's a good picture, then you could use that. And just, as long as you can see it, you'll be good. If you have a tiny picture, actually Cooper, his picture was kind of small. So it was I really had to kind of make up in my imagination some of the details. Because this is actually, it's not teeny tiny, but he's actually kind of small. When you really look at it, like, these two dogs compared to each other, his face is a bit smaller than hers, so it's just harder to see, which makes it a little trickier. Not a huge deal, but if you had like a teeny tiny picture, you might want to try something else. If you have a really pixelated picture, that's going to be hard because you're going to be looking at the details of the face, and if you can't see the details, you really just have to make them up, which is tricky. Okay, so I'm going to put Wilma away. You can see the grid that I did on her picture. I'm going to do a grid on my actual example picture to show you how to do it, but I started to do it, and then I was like, they're not going to be able to see this because she's so dark. So she'll have to be drawn another day. What I am going to use for an example, I'm going to use this guy. This is a cat from the internet. It's not my cat. I have a cat too, but he didn't make the cut today. He's very cute, but he didn't make the cut. He has plenty of artwork. I have several, for some reason, sculptures of him. So someday he'll get a drawing too, but he's left out. This is just a cat from the internet. It was a really good picture, super detailed, and I like that it was zoomed in. So that's why I chose this one. And I printed out a bunch of the same one in case I made a mistake or something. So I'm just going to set those aside. I don't need them all at once. Okay. Any questions before we get started on the actual stuff here? I'm opening my screen and I don't see anything crazy. Okay, cool. So I'll keep going. Just holler at me if I am going too fast or if you have a question. Okay, so the first step here is the grid. So you are going to grid your drawing first. The grid, depending on the size of your image, if you have an image that fills your, a regular, 9x11 piece of printer paper, you can do a 1 inch by 1 inch grid. If you have, something made a sound. Sorry, I'm going to check what that was. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Great. If you have a smaller picture, you might want to do a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch grid. But either way, you want to keep it consistent. So you wouldn't do like 1 inch this way and then 1/2 inch this way. You would just do 1 inch, 1 inch. Most people will do a 1 inch by 1 inch grid. And I will go ahead and start by showing you how to do it. It's very straightforward. But the one thing that I notice sometimes happens is people will kind of start in a random spot, maybe kind of just like not realizing what they're doing. So what you want to do, don't just like plop your ruler down wherever, because you're not going to end up with even lines. You're going to end up with uneven lines. Line your ruler up. Take a good look at your ruler. I always ran into this issue when I was teaching because I had different rulers, and some of the rulers had like a weird little like edge. And so sometimes students would start and they'd have that weird edge and it would bump everything out just a teeny bit and throw everything off. Most rulers probably just start right at the very, where the inch starts, but just look at your ruler, and if it does have a weird edge that's not part of that first inch, make sure you're actually starting at the first inch. Hopefully that makes sense. I assume rulers are normal, but sometimes they're not. So what I'm doing is I'm lining my ruler up with the very edge of the image. I could also line it up with the very edge of the paper, whichever makes more sense. The only thing I don't want to do is just to plop it down because it'll be uneven. So I'm starting at the very edge of the image. I'm going to use a red kind of felt tip pen to do my grid. You could use a colored pencil if you want to be able to see it really, really clearly. A regular pencil will work fine. So I am going to go through and just do a little dash mark at each inch. And for this one, I'm stopping at 10 because that's a good place to stop. And I don't, the 11th inch goes off the page and it just complicates things. So keeping it simple, I'm stopping at a regular inch. I could, if I wanted to just have, like, kind of crop this, I could stop at 9 inches. Maybe I could do, I'm not going to, I'm just going to go to 10. So go ahead and do your dash marks at the top like that. And then you can just move your ruler down. Don't like spin it around or spin your paper around. Just keep the ruler in the same orientation and move it down like that to the edge of your image. Or if I had an image that I maybe had a bunch of open space that I wasn't going to draw, I could stop a little earlier. Let's say I didn't want to draw this bottom bit, which I'm going to, but let's say I wanted to stop right at his chin. I could stop right here and start doing my dash marks. But I am going to go right to the edge of the paper, making sure that this corner is lined up with the edge of the picture on the left side. Okay, so same deal, dash marks. I did just do a little dash mark on the edge of the picture. I didn't do that up here because I was just using the edge as the dash mark, basically. But you could add dash mark if you want. So I am just doing this like so, and filling that in there. Okay. Now I am going to connect my lines. So you can start, you could do this very first one on the edge of the paper. I'm not going to. I don't think you really have to because it's just the edge of the picture and you just know, but that's where you start and stop. So I'm lining up the two first dash marks and just drawing a straight line down. And that might have been a little hard to see. Oh yeah, you can do that. I'm actually, just so you can see better what I'm doing, I'm going to switch to a highlighter because it might just show up a little bit better. As long as for your picture, just make sure you can see it. You don't have to do anything too weird. Yeah. What's up? Okay. Yep. Yeah, felt tip. I think a felt tip pen would work. I think like something like a Sharpie would work. And actually, same thing with the felt tip pen. You just want to be careful not to smudge it too much. Even a pencil might work. I would just like smudging it is the only thing you have to deal with. So like I'm drawing my line and then not picking my ruler up. It's just going like on top. If I had a glossy paper, it might smudge that, which actually is not a major deal. It just might be kind of annoying Yeah. Okay. So I'll give everyone a sec to complete that. If you notice something is going not right and your lines are really crooked, I say stop and look at it and try to figure out what's happening. Don't keep going because they'll just get more and more and more crooked. And if you are getting crooked lines, you can holler at me and I'll change my screen so I can see you, because right now I can only see what I'm doing. Yeah, just stop and tell me. I just popped up the Zoom thing. Hopefully, can you guys see that? Okay, no. I just had this thought that I want to check and make sure that I'm not going to, like, the Zoom meeting's not going to end suddenly at, like, 1 hour or something. I just had that thought. So while I'm double checking that, go ahead and keep drawing your lines. Oh, yeah, sorry. Gotcha. Just trying to figure out how I get back to that screen. Oops. Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a sec. I don't think I need to do that, but I am going to do it for a sec. Oh, yeah, I did need to do that. It works. Okay, good. Sorry. Cool. All right. So whilst everyone's doing that, I'm just double checking my Zoom settings so I don't stop the meeting in the middle of it. The next step, if you are just wondering what's going to come next, we're basically going to repeat the same exact thing on the side. And I'll show you. Okay, good. I just really wanted to make sure I had this set for the right amount of time, and I do. So we're good. Crisis averted. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Okay. Cool. Is everyone at a place where I could start to show the next step, or should I wait a minute? I see a thumbs up. Ready? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna do it. It's just yell at me if you want me to stop. Okay. All right. So here we go. Here's kitty cat. I'm just gonna. I could either flip it like this, or keep it the same way and just flip my ruler, whichever you prefer. I am gonna flip it. Okay, so same deal. You want to use the edge of the picture or the edge of the paper to make sure you're lining up correctly. And so with this guy, if I line up at the edge of the picture starting here, I'm going to end up with this end kind of stopping right in the middle of the 7th inch or 8 inch. I want it to stop since his ear, since there's some important stuff on this side. I actually want this side to be a full inch. I'd rather cut off part of his whiskers than part of his ear. Even though part of his ear is already cut off, I'd rather cut off part of his whiskers. So instead of starting on this end, I'm going to start on this end. So I'm basically just going to move this so that starts at the 7 instead of starting from the bottom and working up. Okay. So when you're doing your own, look at your picture and just kind of think it through before you start gridding. Make sure you're not cutting off anything too important. And that's something I actually probably wouldn't have thought of unless I was going to have an issue. And luckily I was going to have an issue so I could explain that. Okay, so same deal. Got my little dash marks. And I'm going to take my ruler. Same thing, not going to spin the paper around or do anything weird. I'm just going to move the ruler all the way down. Make sure that the 7 or the edge of the ruler, however you're doing it, lines up on that last line. So this will maybe be a little hard to see, but you know what I'm doing. Just doing dash marks. And the key to this is just going slow and kind of looking at what you're doing, like critically, and being like, okay, yep, that's right, and not rushing, because it's easy, but it's also really easy to mess up accidentally. Like I've honestly probably done like 10 or 15 drawings like this just in my teaching career, and I mess them up. I mess them up often just because I'm rushing. So okay, so same deal. I'm just lining up the dashes and connecting the dots. And it might be hard for you to see my bottom dashes. It's actually, I can like barely see it, but you should be able to see your own pretty well. Regular pencil actually works pretty well for this. I think it wouldn't translate on screen, but the kind of shininess of pencil shows up really well in the dark. So A regular pencil actually does work well for this step. Okay. All right, so there's that. So you should end up with something like that. And if you didn't, you can decide, do I want to wing it? And even though my grid is a little weird, use it, or do I want to just redo the grid? Usually, I would recommend just redoing the grid. Then you have a nice solid place to be working from. But if you just have like a little, like maybe one of your lines is a little wonky or something like that, you can probably get away with using that and just remembering that one of your lines is weird. Looking for, I misplaced my scissors, but this is just an option. You don't have to do this. If you want to cut out your picture from the grid, it could help you eliminate some of the noise on the sides. I don't, it's just something you could do. You definitely don't have to. So like you could trim it so that it's just exactly what you're going to be drawing and you don't have to worry about anything else that's going on. Could be more helpful if you had like a picture with a lot of negative space, like just like it's this whole area that you're not going to draw. But yeah, just something you could do. Okay. I'm going to do it on the very bottom too, because those are parts that I am not going to draw and I don't want to be distracted by them. You don't need to do it if you don't want. Up to you. Okay. Boom. So that's what I'm working with. This nice little mystery cat from the internet. Internet kitty. So while everyone's doing that, we will grid again. Your regular paper, your drawing paper, is going to be the next step. Before I go to that next step, I'm going ahead a little bit, but this is something you can just fill in as you go. It's not, you can just fill it in. So I like to, and I kind of recommend it. It helps since I'm not a mathematical, logical thinker. Sometimes I can get kind of mixed up with number stuff or like spatial stuff. So what I like to do is I actually just go and number the inches at the top. And then this is up to you. You could either do like A, B, C, D, E, F, G on the side, or you could number them again. I like to number them again because it helps me count and keep track. So the only thing that could mix you up here is that this first box is number 1 on both sides. Like you don't skip it and go straight to, you don't do like number 1 down here. Number 1 is the first box on both. So it's a little easier to keep track if you do the alphabet, but just for me, I like to have it numbered on both sides. So I have 9 across, 7 down. It's like a crossword puzzle, but with drawing. That will help me keep track of what I'm doing. So you can do that if you want. You don't necessarily have to. All right. Is everyone ready for the next step? If you are... Oh, there is? Okay, thank you. Yeah, see, I am bad at that. How do I get back? Hold on a second. They should have it so it like pops up, I feel like, for the host. Let me unshare, just so I can see. Oh, yeah. So the question was, I'm drawing on a bigger paper than my picture. How should I grid my paper? That's a super duper good question. And actually I'm glad you asked that because that is how, let me share my screen again. When I would teach this class to high school students, and usually I would do this with like my drawing class, which was like 10th grade and up. So, like it's a bit more of an advanced class. I had done art classes in the past. But anyway, I would actually have them use huge pieces of paper, like really big. I wish I had I wish I had an example because they always did such a good job. They always were really happy with the project because they had this really cool, like a really big drawing that was super detailed. But anyway, it's this method works really well for transferring a small image to be a larger image. So if I had a really big paper and you would need to do the math to make sure it will fit on your paper, all you're going to do is you're going to double your, or even triple depending on how big your paper is, or 1.5, something like that. But basically you're going to double the size of each box. So if I had a big enough paper, I could do a 2-inch by 2-inch grid instead of a 1-inch by 1-inch grid. And that will just blow everything up and double it. I closed out of the chat, but does that make sense that you just, instead of doing the same exact grid twice, you do the same exact grid? So if I had a giant piece of paper, I would do a 9 square by 7 square grid, but it would actually be 18 inches by 14 inches on the big piece of paper. Here, let me. Okay, so if that makes sense, I'll move forward. But that's all you do. You just double it and make sure it fits. Double it or make it like a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch grid. Okay, but for most of us, and if you have the opportunity to make it bigger, that's fun. You should. But for most of us, and just what I'm going to show you is just duplicating the same grid. This paper is not quite big enough that I could double it. I don't think it would fit on my screen. So I'm going to be replicating the grid, a 9-inch by 7-inch grid. For my grid on the paper, I'm definitely not going to use marker because it would always be there. I am going to use ideally something like a 2H pencil, so the super light pencil, or if you just got your regular, this kind of pencil, that's totally going to work. My but suggestion is to not bear down on your pencil, like hard. Just keep your touch really light because you want to be able to erase the pencil mark and you want the pencil mark not to leave a dent in the paper because the dent will show up and it will be sad. Okay. Yeah, thank you for hollering at me to have me answer that question. I can only kind of see the shared screen. I have not technologically advanced to the point where I know how to go back and forth. So, or how to do it efficiently. So anyway, I'm starting at the edge of the paper. I'm not starting random because you'll end up with a mess. So start at the very edge of your paper and you're just gonna do your same exact process. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, like that. And I did those dash marks actually kind of dark. I think I'm actually, for the sake of you being able to see what I'm doing, I'm going to use actually a darker pencil than what I recommend, but it's just so you can see. But you know you want to use a light pencil. So if I were doubling it, this would actually be 18 inches long, and each dash mark would be 2 inches apart. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the bottom of the page, and oh yeah, that's way darker. And I'm just going to number off these up to 9. Okay, so I have that. You notice that my dash marks are not to the very edge of the paper. That's fine. As long as they're 1 inch apart, that's all that matters. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and connect the dots same way. And so this line is crazy dark. If I were you doing this project using, let's just use a regular pencil to show you. I would use my regular pencil. I don't even know if you'll be able to see it, but I would do it like crazy light. Like that. So you can probably barely see that. That's kind of what you want. You don't want it to be too dark because it's the intention is that it will go bye-bye. And if it's really dark, it's hard to make it go bye-bye. But you need to see what I'm doing, so make it dark. And same thing, if you're doing this and you're like, something looks weird, just stop and figure out what looks weird as soon as you notice it so you can fix it before it gets like out of control. Yeah, just kind of pay attention and don't like power through. Just stop for a second and try to figure out what happened. Okay, so my picture is only going to fill this space. This, I actually like to keep it. I'm not going to immediately cut it off. In my example of my friend's dog Cooper, I had less of a space, but the space on the side is just kind of extra. But it's kind of nice to do little tests or little notes or something. So I like to keep that space until I'm actually all the way done, and then I cut it off. Or in Cooper's case, I just never cut it off until I finish it like all the way. Okay, so there's my 9 squares, and then I'm going to remember that I'm going to start at the top, but I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm basically replicating exactly what I did with this. So instead of starting at the bottom, wouldn't be a huge deal if you did, but instead of starting at the bottom, just to keep it straight in my head, I'm going to start at the top with number 7, just exactly how I did with the other one. And I'll push that closer to the edge. 7, right? Yeah. And then I'm just going to go and do my dash marks. Like so. This little zone down here will end up also being extra. But I don't need to think about that quite yet. Same thing, start at 7 on the edge. I don't spin my paper around, I don't spin the ruler around, I just move it down. And there. So dash marks on both sides, and I can go ahead and connect them to their counterpart. I'm going to start from the top. I feel kind of awkward starting from the bottom. I'm going to start from the top. Since I'm using this hard or soft dark pencil, ooh, that looks a little crookedy. I'm going to roll with it. That's going to be an example of me thinking it looks a little crookedy. Like this part dipped down a little further, but I'm just going to roll with it. I think it's small enough that it won't really affect me too much in the long run. If I did a line, I'm going to do this to show you. If I did a line and I bumped the ruler and it was like this, like, oh, I did it probably too light to see. But if I did a line and it was like crazy like that, that would really throw everything off. So don't do that. Like, if you make a little mistake like that, it's not a huge deal to just go through and erase it. Most likely, you really won't even need to reconnect these lines. If you wanted to, of course you could, but probably don't even really need to reconnect them, just because your brain will fill in the blank there. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, just use your judgment. If you make a mistake, if it's like worth fixing, fix it. And if it's like so minor that as long as you can remember there was something to pay attention to, then just roll with it. Okay. Boom. Okay. So there's that. Just for clarity, it could help if you have extra lines to erase them, just so you're not like accidentally like including them in your drawing and throwing yourself off. Again, just another thing that might make it a little easier, but it's not super important. So you can see that some of the, I didn't try super hard to erase, but you can see the lines still show up. If I had been drawing lightly, there is a line there. I could erase that and it would be just totally gone, no problem. So just, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, how are we doing? I I can't see anyone. You guys are still here, right? Okay, good. Good. Imagine if I was just here talking. Aaron, if that happens, text me and tell me that. Tell me that everything's gone wrong. Anyway, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna number the squares on this too, just so I know. So my numbers are gonna be inside the picture. So I'm gonna switch over to using this regular pencil and doing it lightly. But I'm gonna just do it exactly the same. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So 1 through 9 on the top. And then this is weird, but it's like 1, 1. If you did if you wanted to do A, B, C, it'd be like 1A. So up to you. But I like numbers. Okay. So there's that. Those numbers will disappear. So draw them light. I did them a little bit darker than I needed to, but not too bad. Okay. So everyone should basically have almost a carbon copy, same size grid, except if you change the size. So if you went bigger, your grid would be the same quantity of boxes, but just bigger. You actually could make it smaller too. If I'm like, I want to draw a little kitty cat, then you could do like a 1/2 inch grid instead of a 1 inch grid. I'm going to show you the next step, which I kind of invented. I think it helps. It's something you could theoretically skip, but I think it's actually really helpful, so I do it. I'm going to talk to you about some contour lines and show you a way to identify them. So for that, I'm only going to use the photograph. I don't really need the drawing paper yet. Is everyone at a place where they can at least kind of just listen to this part? If you're not, holler at me or say something in chat. Okay. Looks like we're pretty good. Okay. So, yeah, just like I said, if I'm going too fast, just yell at me and I'll slow down. But anyway, contour lines. So the contour lines are nothing crazy. They're just the simple, basic lines. So if this is kind of a good example. This is like the lid to my pencil thing with my name on it, because I write my name on everything. The lines are just like the important lines of something that you're looking at that show you the information. So this picture, this little drawing of a shoe on here, is kind of a line drawing, and it included the contour lines, or the important lines that tell you what is going on. It does have a little shading, but not really. It's not like the shade is the only thing that's available in the image. Some images, I don't have like an example, but some images really might not have any lines. They might just be like different shades that kind of make a shape. We're going to be using lines to create our image. So what I really like to do when I do this kind of project, I'm going to try to figure out which is the best color to do this so you can see. I like to have people use a colored pencil, works really well, like a red color pencil or green or something kind of bright that will show up against your picture. I'm going to try it. I'm hesitant to do it with the Sharpie or the highlighter because it's kind of thick. I like a thin tip so I can actually get the accurate lines. I'm going to try it with this red thing and see if it shows up for you. And if not, I'll try the Sharpie. Okay, so contour lines. So I'm looking for like the important lines. So to me, the important lines are the things that show the features of the face. So like the outline of the ear, the outline of the eye, the outline of like the pupil thing, outline of the nose, maybe a whisker, maybe not. I might skip the whiskers. I think that's give or take, like you can decide. I'm not going to do like every detail of every hair. Just looking for the important stuff. Okay, so, and it's up to you how detailed you get, but you want to, can you see that? I'm going to do the Sharpie so you can see. That doesn't look like it's showing up great. So I'm basically tracing over those important lines with a colored pencil. Does work great. I just have for some reason couldn't find a colored pencil. And I think that this probably will show up better on the screen. So I'm filling in those important lines, and when I get to an area where it's kind of like ambiguous what the line is, like obviously there's all these little hairs, but if I kind of blur my eyes and look past the little hairs, there's a shape here. So there's a shape of this dark, like the inside of his ear is darker. I'm gonna just kind of loosely, without overthinking it, outline the edge of that shape, and I could even go up here and do that. Um, that that line in the final drawing will kind of vanish, and it will turn back into the little hairs and the dark and the light. But it's going to remind me, oh, this part's dark when I'm shading. This part's light. So that's an example of a contour line that you might not really notice right away. Same thing. So this is like a soft focus on this cat, or it's like really zoom or really specific focus. It's his face out here blurs, which is kind of cool. But I want to just have an idea of like where his face ends. So I'm just kind of guesstimating where that is, like so. And when I do the actual final drawing, I will be using more of the shades than this actual line. But for what I'm doing right now, I want to have an idea of the outline of his face. Okay, so same thing with that ear. I'm just kind of like filling in a little bit of mental information. Up here, so this is where if you have a really dark animal, like Wilma, my dog, she's like, if I was trying to do anything on this side of her face, it's kind of just like a guessing game. Like, where is her mouth? Where is her, like, snout? It is a guessing game, but I could guess and try to fill in that information. It's just a little harder. But it's, you can do it. It's just a little trickier when they're dark. So on this little guy, this little zone here, the top of his head is dark enough that it kind of just disappears into his back. I'm just going to guesstimate where it is. I think that seems about right. It's actually not even super important because when I shade it, it's all going to blend in anyway. But if it helps you to like be like that is the top of his head, then you can draw that in. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the facial features, which are pretty important. I want to have those somewhat correct and outlined pretty nicely. I think a lot of animals might have this. They really have like almost an outline of their eye, like they're wearing like eyeliner. So I'm including that outline as part of the contour line drawing, as well as the eye itself and the information inside the eye, the pupil or whatever that's called. It's probably hard to see over there. Maybe this side will be a little easier to see. So I'm like actually outlining the outside and this little kind of tear duct thing, but I'm outlining also oops, I made a little mistake, that's okay. Outlining the inside and the pupil. Okay. Oh, his nose. So that little thing. And all of this information is kind of up to you, like what you think is important. You can do as much or as little as you want. I wouldn't say to go crazy because then you'll just be overwhelmed with things that you have to draw. But basically, you are going to draw what you are currently outlining. So anything that you're like, ooh, I know I want to draw that part, like just include that. So maybe I want to do like some of these stripes. Maybe I want to do these little side stripes. And if I wanted to, whiskers are a little weird. I find it better to just draw in the whiskers freehand because if you're trying to like exactly replicate them, it's kind of difficult or more difficult than it needs to be. But if you wanted to, you could trace the whiskers. I'm not gonna. I just did that one just so you know you could. Okay, so I'll give everyone a little time to do their contour lines on their picture, and you don't have to get every single one. Just get the ones you think you need. I'll give everyone a minute though. I'll just drink my non-alcoholic IPA. I'm just gonna stop sharing so I can look and see. Everyone looks awesome. Everyone looks very focused. Erin, which cat are you drawing? Or what are you drawing? What? What do you mean you don't have any pictures? What are you doing then? You don't have any pictures of your cat? I Of course you do. Do you not have a printer? You don't? Don't you work from home? Yeah, I guess that's true. That's funny. Well, that's always a good option. Using a reference book. Um, excellent problem solving, Erin. You're probably going to be sad that you're not going to have a drawing of your cat, though. So now you can do one. Yeah. Did you ever do this in school? You didn't? Okay. I was wondering if people would have done this in school because I actually did it in high school, and you and I went to the same high school. Yeah, yeah, we went. You you missed that day, I guess. She gave up by the time you were there, I guess. All right, I'm gonna go back to my drawing screen here to show you. I'll start to show you the next step. Um, if you are not there yet, don't rush to get there, but it's pretty easy to get caught up. Okay, so all right. If you don't want me to go ahead, holler at me. Because I don't need to. I just don't want to keep people waiting if they are ready. And like I said, I've done this like a gazillion times, so I probably do it faster than average. So if I'm way going too fast, just tell me. Okay, so we did step 1, 2, 3. We gridded again. We did the contour lines. Now we're gonna do the transfer. This is like the important step. I'm not going to say it's the hard step because it's not really that hard, but it does take a little mental training to do, and it takes a little focus. And at the same time, it takes a little bit of like letting go of focus. so this is the crux. This is the crux of the climb here. All right, I'm going to use a dark pencil again. I would continue, if I were doing this at home myself, continue to use a light pencil or to at least be pressing light. I'll use oh yeah, HB. I was right. My pencil actually says 2 HB. So, haha. I'm gonna use this. I'll press kind of hard so you can see, but you should be pressing like so light that only you could see. Like I just drew something and you can't see it through the screen. Like that's how light you should draw, so that if you make a mistake, you can erase it, no big deal. Okay, so this transfer thing, it is basically gonna happen like this. You're gonna start, I recommend starting in the corner and working your way across. I like to start in the top left, probably because I think like when we learn to read, we learn to view everything top to bottom, left to right. If you were from like, I don't know, China, maybe you would go, I don't even know what order they view things in when they read, but they know it's different. So I think a natural inclination is to start in the top left and just kind of scan across like you're reading a book. You don't have to do that. I recommend it though. So you might end up, like in my picture here, on the bottom, if I, for whatever reason, started in the bottom, I'd have several squares that have nothing in them. I'm just going to straight up skip those. So I do have something in my very first square, but if you just happen to not have anything in your first square, just leave it blank, skip it. Just don't do anything, leave it empty. But I do have something, so I'm going to start there. So I'm starting in the top left square, and all I'm doing, I'm forgetting, and actually, if for some reason you end up really struggling with this, this is a good little trick. I have all this weird stuff on this one, but that's okay. I would just use some plain paper, and you can actually even tape. Sometimes, if I had students that were like major struggling with this, I would have them tape together like 4 note cards to have like a perfect square inch, and they would scooch it across the paper like like a little viewfinder. So like imagine that you can only see that square. That actually really helps if you're struggling with it. You can start off doing this if you want, but basically what you're doing if you do this is you are forgetting all of what's going on over here, because this can be intimidating and kind of like blow your mind if you're like, oh God, I have to like draw this cat. But if you just break it down to 1 square at a time, you're like, oh, I just got to draw that little loop-de-doo. So that's all you're doing, 1 square at a time. You're just copying whatever your contour line is. So in my case, I'm just copying whatever this orange line is going to be. So I'm trying to, I don't have to be crazy about it. I'm just trying to line it up so that it's pretty similar. Oh, I made it way bigger, actually. I'm trying to line it up so it's pretty similar in size and in where it kind of bumps into the edge of the square inch. So I went crazy. I did kind of exactly what not to do and made it way big. So don't do that. I erased that, but see how it's still really there. I'm just gonna make it a little smaller. So I'm just trying to basically replicate what I'm looking at here. And then I'm gonna move across just like I'm reading. I'm not gonna worry about what's below or what's coming up after. I'm just gonna do this little next square. So this first square was kind of like a, like almost, just like a little curve. This is like a long curving line that starts kind of at the top, not at the top, kind of not quite halfway, not quite to the bottom of square 2. And I'm gonna arc it across, and it basically seems like it ends in the corner. Okay, so you don't have to be doing this with your paper. The idea is that you're focusing on just 1 square at a time. All you're doing is drawing what you see in the square. The only thing to keep in mind is that the lines connect. So this next square, square 3, it's got like barely anything in it, just like this little tiny bit of a line. But if I was like misinterpreting it and I drew it way up here and it didn't connect, like that would be weird. So all you have to do is make sure that the lines connect and that you're drawing what you see in each square. Okay, so literally square 3 on mine was like nothing. It was just like a little teensy little bit. So this was another thing I would have students do if they were having trouble keeping track. You can just put an X as you go, which could be distracting or it could be helpful, like just an option. So 4 for me is kind of like nothing. I'm going to leave it blank. I'm not going to forget that it's there, though. I'm not going to accidentally start filling in something else in that square. I'm going to just leave it blank forever. 5 is also a blank. 6 is not a blank. I got some stuff going on. So 4, 5, skip. Let's go to 6. And so on this one, I see I have this little line that loops across. I'm looking at where it shows up on the edge of the paper, and then it goes just kind of arcs down towards the middle of the paper, or towards the middle of that square, like so. So I just have that. I gotta remember to use dark. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So 7. I'm not going to narrate every single one, but I'll do this first row and maybe into the second row just so you know what I'm doing. So 7, mine has kind of a zigzaggy that goes, and this is just that value area of dark and light. So this is something I could have a little leeway with. Like if I messed it up a little bit, I'd probably just leave it because it's a shape that could be different. It's not like, if you messed up the shape of the eye you'd want to fix it. Or like I messed up the shape of the edge of the ear and I fixed it. But, you know, for something that's could change, like a stripe or a dark spot, you could, you know, do it a little different and it's not a biggie. Okay, so that's 7, 8 is the tip of this little dark area. We'll draw that. And the way I'm drawing super dark lines, this is going to have more of a cartoon look. So the looser and lighter you draw, the more realistic you'll be able to have of your image. But if you want it to have a really bold look, then you could be pressing down hard. So 8 goes down, and then it cuts across like so. Okay. Yes. What's up? You think I have a square off? Let's see. Well, something like, I think I'm right. So this, but that's, I mean, honestly, like, even though I do this, yeah, even though I've done this like a gazillion times, sometimes you just like skip a square and you're like, oh. So yeah, so 6, and you could always stop yourself and thank you for stopping me. But if you're like, wait, something seems wrong, if something seems wrong, it probably is. You can stop and like, it's nice if it's the same size, you can like literally put it next to each other and be like, that matches, that matches, that matches. We're good. It's a little harder if you're changing size, but it is good to stop. Like, honestly, if something feels wrong with this project in particular, it might be. A lot of times I end up saying, like, something will look really, it's kind of weird because if something feels wrong, it probably might be, especially in the beginning. But then as you go, certain shapes, you get kind of tunnel vision and you look at them for so long, they just start to look bizarre. And you're like, that can't possibly be right. There's no way that's going to make sense in the long run. But then it actually does. So your brain does really weird things. So it's always good to stop and look and make and kind of double check. But sometimes your brain reads things really differently than actually how they look. It's like that difference of looking at a piece of the puzzle compared to the whole puzzle. Like, this one piece makes no sense, but actually when it's in the whole puzzle, it does. So I'm going to start filling in line 2. Then I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and I'm going to bust through and get down to the important parts of the face, let you guys work without having to listen to me jabber. And then when I get to some important parts of the face, like the eyes, I'll show you a couple tricks. Okay, but basically you're just going through and filling in each square one at a time. So I'm going to, just like I'm reading a book, did that top line. I'm going to go to the second line. I'm going to duplicate the line that I see here. So it just connects from the tip of the ear down to the corner of the page, but not quite to the edge. So that's square 2 there. And then the next one, yes, yeah. Oh yeah. Nope. I would use a regular pencil now, and then when you start doing your shading, switch to the colored pencil. Especially if you're drawing super light with a regular pencil, you know, you can erase it. Colored pencil you can't. I would do this in regular pencil for the outline part, and then switch when you start filling in any shading. And this is a really fun project to do in colored pencil. I thought about teaching it that way, but it's a little more time consuming and a little bit more nuanced, and pencil's straightforward. So that's why we're doing it like this. But yeah, it's really a similar concept. Good question. Same thing if you wanted to like watercolor paint, this would be this actually would be really, really good for watercolor painting, because you would basically be creating a paint by number for yourself with like a perfect outline. Yeah, good question. So I'm gonna kind of stop talking. I'm just gonna go through and draw mine. I'm assuming that everyone is drawing theirs right now. Yeah, looks like it. So just holler at me. It definitely, just since I don't get notified if the chat I don't get like alerted with a sound if the chat comes on. Just like just stop and holla. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep going through. And if I think of something, I'll mention it. And if you have a question, you mention it. So I just thought of something to mention. I kind of said this before, but I'm going to like reiterate it. If you have a contour line that's kind of just indicating like a change in shade, like what I just drew here, I drew it a little different. Like it's actually a kind of totally different shape than what's actually on my picture, and it's okay to do that. You just wouldn't necessarily want to do that with an important contour line, like on the eye or something like that. So that's repetitive. I probably didn't need to say that, but I did. And you are welcome to just keep moving ahead. If you get hung up on anything, you can always stop and ask. I am going to stop when I get to the eyes. So if you want to wait for me to do eyes or important features, by all means do. I'll give you a couple little tricks for doing those when I get down there in a minute. And I realized I actually forgot to draw the top of his head, because probably just because it's so dark I didn't realize it. So I'm going out of order and going back. If anyone's watching me, that's what's happening. So I don't know if anyone else is making any little mistakes, but I've made a couple little mistakes that um, I didn't notice right away. Like when I got to like the next square, I was like, oh wait, something's weird here. So all I did, if I did that, I kind of just stopped and like, okay, what did I do? And I just looked at it, kind of figured out what I did wrong, and fixed it. Um, Erasers, magical things. But yeah, don't be worried about making a mistake. It's pretty easy to do and easy to fix. Okay, so um, I'm not sure where everyone is. I kind of cranked through it and did a lot of the drawing really quick, um, so that when I demonstrate my little sneaky trick for doing detailed, tricky areas, you would have kind of a reference point of where everything else was. So what I'm going to do, and you can decide if you want to pay attention to this or if you just want to keep drawing, it's up to you. Um, it's not, this is like not a critical step, but it's something that's kind of helpful. Um, so anyway, I'm going to show you a little trick that I like to do for really complicated, important squares. So if I have, this cat's pretty simple because it's so zoomed in, but if I had a square that had like a lot of facial features and maybe even like multiple facial features, let's say it was a small enough picture, so like Cooper, I think, for example, yeah. So like on Cooper here, when I drew him, he had really, his squares were pretty small. So like for example, I'm just outlining so you can see, he had a couple squares that had a lot of information. So like this one right here had, the edge of his mouth, a teeth, kind of part of his nose, not really, but like really close. His teeth, like his tongue, the edge of his mouth on the outside. It just had a lot of stuff. So that would have been one that I could have used this trick on. I don't necessarily need it for the cat because everything's big, but it is helpful. So I'm going to show you. You can do a square within a square, and it will give you even more information to work off of. I guess the proper thing to do would be to mark it with a, like just the same way. So I'm breaking this up by a 1/2 inch and cutting it like that. Not cutting it with scissors, but using that 1/2 inch mark to draw an additional line. So I'm basically making kind of a window frame within that one important square that is going to break it down even further and make it so that I can isolate information on an even like bigger level. So let's make sure I have the right square. So this is 5 by 5. Perfect. And I actually wrote, since I'm like, just my brain doesn't work when there's numbers involved, I wrote the numbers down here too so I could like easily keep track. That's a good cool trick. So 5 by 5, so this is the square. So if I ever actually do this in real life, I usually kind of cheat and just eyeball the line, which is maybe bad advice, but but if you feel confident that you can get it pretty close to the middle, you can get away with just eyeballing it. Um, I am lazy, so that's what I did. I usually will do it like that. But anyway, so for this eye, just double check 5 by 5, 5 by 5. Good. So instead of looking at the whole square, I'm only going to look at one square within a square at a time. So this first square has the pupil in it, and it's kind of like close to the edge. And this is something, I'll have another point on this in a sec, I'll wait. So then the bottom square also has the pupil and the edge. Okay, cool. The bottom square has the very corner of like the eye itself, and it comes around. The next square, let's see, this is getting tricky. It's making my brain work, brain exercise, so I'm connecting those two because they weren't connecting the way I was drawing it. Looking a little wacky, but that's okay. This is one of those things where it looks really, like, disturbing me how weird it looks right now, but it's just because it's not done, I'm pretty sure. So I need to follow through, even though it looks super weird, creepy to me, super creepy to me right now. I'm gonna follow through with it and finish the shape, and then when everything's together, it is like piecing together a puzzle. I'll know if it makes sense. Okay. I'm not sure if it makes sense yet, but I think it's going to. This goes in here. Okay. So there's that. He's also got like a little highlight here, so I'll draw that. Okay. So that let me get some more detail and kind of break it down in a more digestible way than if I was just trying to draw all that important information in one spot. But the eye's not done. So if I wanted to, and I'm cheating and just guesstimating where it would be broken up, use a ruler if you want, but I didn't. So I'll do that again over here, like so. Okay. And now I can see, okay, this other hunk of his eye goes almost all the way to the middle, but not quite. And it's really like the dark part. So it definitely will give it more of a cat eye shape because it makes it longer. And then the, whatever that's called, the outer dark edge of the eye is there too. So I think it mostly looks pretty normal. The thing that looks still a little bizarro to me is the two pupils. Like, this one's skinnier than this one, and they're kind of like not quite facing the right way. So this is where you could use a little bit of creative liberty. So I'm gonna delete that pupil. Pupil? I don't know. I think that's a pupil. I'm going to delete what I drew there because that just didn't match. Even though I was really following this, it didn't match. Like, at the end of the day, the drawing should make sense together more than you duplicating the picture. So if something like just doesn't line up and you're like, oh, I can just tweak it, like, go just tweak it. You don't have to like copy the picture exactly. So I'm just gonna kind of change this pupil. Oh gosh, I don't know if that's better. I might need to work on that more. Maybe it's just because cat pupils are weird looking. So that's a little better. I'm gonna keep working on it probably, but feel free to make those little changes, and also know that sometimes if it's like just the outline, it might look just real weird until it's shaded in. That plays a part too. So to me, it doesn't. I'm like, okay, that looks a little weird. I'm gonna leave it for now and just make sure that when I'm shading, I'm gonna come back to it and try to get it less weird. Okay. I also can kind of be thinking about how other things relate to the things near them. So on this eye, I made this like outline real thick compared to this eye. And this one, in the picture, it is a little thicker, but I really kind of over-exaggerated it here and then under-exaggerated it here. So I might just think about that for when I'm shading and maybe just leave it. For now, I'm just going to make this one a little thicker, and I'm just keeping it in mind for later that that's something I might mess around with. These contour lines are kind of your guidelines. They're not the end-all, be-all. So there is some wiggle room. Okay. Two, look and see if the cat is not missing anything. Nope. Okay, I'm going to keep drawing, and everyone else do the same, and then in a little bit we'll start to talk about your shade, how shading is going to happen. Okay? You guys keep rolling. I am actually going to do, I think I'm going to just trace this maybe? No. I want to do one without all these lines. I'm gonna do something. I'm just gonna draw another one, like kind of quick. So don't panic, but just keep working on yours. And then we will talk about shading real quick. So this one's gonna look lighter, so you probably won't see it quite as well. Ooh, you know what? I changed my mind. I have an idea. So what I'm doing, I am doing, I'm doubling it, and I'm just going to do a detail, like a small section of the picture, to show you some techniques for shading. So you won't see me shade the entire image, but you'll see me shade a portion of it. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I drew my lines so dark, it'll be a little weird. Like you won't get the full effect with the lines so dark. You'll just the lines on my example are never going to go away. So I'm going to do this one lighter so the lines can at least go away a little bit. But anyway, that's what's anyone's watching me, you might notice that I'm drawing kind of differently than I did in the first example that I did. I'm doing more of a looser, sketchier line. That's kind of more typically how I draw, and it lets me kind of like rework a shape like as I'm drawing it. The way that I was drawing in the first example was really kind of an unusual way for me to like hold a pencil and stuff, just like pressing down really hard and making a deep imprint. I don't usually do that. It just works better for showing it on the screen. But I don't know, just if you notice these lines are much more sketchier, it's really, I'm doing that more intentionally. And it could be a good thing to practice for yourself, like doing sketchy lines, because it just gives you a little more wiggle room. If that makes any sense. You're a little less restricted to like, this is the line. Like there's a, kind of like a couple options within a line if they're sketchier. So in a couple minutes, I'll start to show you some techniques for shading. I don't want to do that if like no one is even remotely close to that point, because we do have almost a whole hour. I want to have a little time to kind of show each other's work at the end. And I don't anticipate everyone completely finishing. It would not totally make sense to finish this project 100% in this amount of time. Just for reference, usually if I ever do this way at home, I really spend a couple days on it. Like I'll do, sit and do it for like an hour or two at a time and just spread it out over a couple days. It's good to take breaks. If I was doing a big one, then I would definitely be taking probably a couple weeks. When I've done this project in person with students, and you have like a 45-minute class or whatever, it's a several-week project. Part of that is because they were high school students and they were distracted, but it can be a very time-consuming project if you're going for like hyper detail, which is kind of the intention with this project, is that you can do hyper detail. You could do hyper realism if you wanted to. I don't have an example of something I've done that's like hyper realism, but it is an option. Like even Cooper here, he's not super realistic. I did him probably in like an hour or two, but you can really dive in like very, very, very deeply to getting things to look like they are basically a photograph. So it all depends on how much time you're putting in and how much effort, really, at the end of the day. Especially for this project, it's very time and effort based. It's almost less talent than time and effort. But anyway, I got off on a tangent there. I was just saying that because when I start to show you the shading stuff, you might not be done doing your transfer all the way. I'll wait a couple minutes, but I do want to get some of that shading stuff in because it is important. I'll give you a good demo on it, but maybe in like 5 or 10 minutes or so. But no rush. Moral of the story: don't rush. what I'm going to do now, it is the next step, but it's very basic step. Like you probably just, maybe some people have already started to do this if they were ready to. It's to erase the grid. So, straightforward step, you just want to be, and if you are not there yet, don't rush yourself to get there, or like just keep going. But that is the next step, is to erase the grid. I'm using my big, it's making my screen jiggle, but I'm using the big eraser, and I'm kind of just going over everything, but obviously not the lines of the picture, not like the contour lines. Sometimes this weird thing, I think it depends on your paper, sometimes this weird thing happens, and if there's this, I don't think this happens a lot, but I've noticed it before, a spot where you erase kind of holds the pencil differently and like kind of have a different color. So if you erase kind of a lot of like the whole space rather than just exactly where the lines are, that can help prevent that weird thing from happening. It's just, I don't even know if that's something that happens often. I've seen it happen in the past, and it's super annoying. So I just say to like get that eraser on everything except for the actual contour lines you want. Um, it might prevent you from having an annoying thing happen. If you have like little spaces where you want to erase lines, you could use the eraser pen. I usually save these for actually doing the details because they're kind of, like for an eraser, they're kind of expensive. Just a smaller eraser is good to use. It's always good to just on the side of your paper, on a scrap paper, you just erase a little bit first to make sure your eraser doesn't have anything weird on it. If you happen to be using a drawing pencil, these ones that I have are Blick Studio ones, and they don't have an eraser, which is kind of good. But they have this blue, they're blue, and every once in a while, I kind of have trained myself out of it because I use them a lot, but sometimes you forget that there's no eraser and you just flip your pencil around and it'll go like that. And these ones make a bold blue line. So if you just something to be aware of. If you happen to have a pencil that the wood is colored, don't accidentally erase with it because it might ruin your picture. Like this blue thing is devastating. It like doesn't go away. It's bad. So if I was like, almost all the way done and I accidentally did that, I would be sad. I don't think you can get them at Michael's. So Dick Blick is a company. It's a website. It's all art supplies. It's actually usually when I was teaching, I would order almost all of my supplies from Dick Blick. They have all different kinds of brands of art supplies, like Michael's does, but they also have their own brand of a lot of kind of like basic level art supplies. So it's perfect for school because they're affordable, but they are high quality. So I almost order all of my bulk supplies from Dick Blick for. We're building an education center. Most of the supplies for the education center will come from Dick Blick, probably. Michael's is good too. If I'm buying stuff just for me, I'll go to Michael's or if you're local here, go to the MSU bookstore. But yeah, those specific pencils are from Dick Blick, and I ordered this nice little, it's all, I've lost pencils and stuff, but this nice little 12-pack with a good range of value. And it was, I don't really remember how much it was. I don't know, maybe like $7 or $8, maybe $10, something like that. Yeah, so that's from Dick Blick, but you can for sure get the same thing at Michael's, I'm sure, just a different brand. And I'm sure if you ask someone who pencil draws on like a professional level, which is pretty unusual, you don't see that a lot, but I'm sure if you ask someone who is like really into pencil drawing, they might have some really high-end pencils that just are great, but I've never used anything. I've only used student grade pencils, and it is nice. It's nice to have a variety of pencils as opposed to just like the regular 2H pencil. It does make a difference. Not enough that you can't do it if you don't have that available, but it is nice if you do have them. Okay. So it's 7:45. I would like to show you some of the next steps, and then I'll let you get rolling on it and kind of get a feel for it, ask questions. Like I've been saying, you probably won't complete everything tonight unless you have a smaller image or a simpler image or you're very efficient, and that is okay. That's not a bad thing. But I want to just make sure I have plenty of time to show you these next steps so that you know how to do it on your own. Okay, so the next step I have written here, I've done the transfer, done all the other steps. I have these two images in pretty different style. This one, lighter one, harder to see on the screen, but definitely more of how I would typically draw. I think honestly, in the long run, this style is going to yield a better final product for me, because it's more real. It gives me the flexibility to make it more realistic looking. This, super easy to see on the screen, more cartoony, and probably a little bit less accurate because I couldn't rework it the way that I can rework this. So just a difference in how I approached it and how that affected the product. Both would be fine. I'd be confident that with either one of these I could end up with a good picture. Just a different thing. The thing that would be hard with this is I drew so hard with the grid and with the outlines. Like that stuff's never going to go away. So it's kind of, can't actually use it, but the actual picture itself is fine, even though this one's a little nicer, I think. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is toning. This toning is kind of optional. It's not crucial. It can throw you off a little bit, or it can be really helpful. So I'll show you it, and then you decide if you want to do it or not. I like to do it. I don't always do it. It kind of depends. If I have if I have a very light picture, so if I had like a picture of like a polar bear in the snow, I actually would maybe do it and then do a lot of erasing. Reductive drawing is what that's called, when you basically are drawing with an eraser. There would be some cases where I maybe wouldn't do it at all. I'm trying to think when that would be. I don't know. I usually do it. So anyway, this is where you're going to use, if you have it, you don't need to, a darker pencil, which I actually grabbed the wrong one. So like a 6B. So like I said, the B pencils have softer lead, and they put more graphite out on the paper. It's kind of like charcoal, but it's not charcoal. I've experimented and have had students experiment with. They're just like, why don't I just use charcoal for this part? Which is a good question. You can imagine like charcoal is super easy to blend. You could cover a lot of space like really efficiently. It doesn't mesh really well with graphite. You can, I don't have any, but they do have like these like graphite sticks that are they look like charcoal, but they're graphite. Those are great for this. I just don't have one. So if you were like, ooh, I want to do this all in charcoal, you could draw this underneath drawing super light. You could do it in pencil. It would be better to do in charcoal. If you did it in pencil, like super light, it'd probably be fine. You could do this whole project in charcoal. But since we're using pencil, you really do want to stick with pencil unless you have like a really good idea of what you want to do. One time I did a really cool owl, and it was before I had done this project a bazillion times. And I was like, I want the background to be super dark. I'm going to use charcoal, and I did, and it really kind of ruined the picture. It just didn't look right together. It didn't mesh. It was like, oh, why is that like so different? It just was weird. Okay, so for toning, anyway, moving on. For toning, what I'm going to do, this is kind of weird. What I'm going to do, ooh, that's interesting. So that might, see that like streak? That might be from an eraser. This will be interesting to see if it does it here. It'll show up the most right now. That eraser thing I was talking about, the eraser like somehow makes it so the pencil does weird things. That might show up right now. So if it does, that's what it is. Anyway, so I drew, like filled in some space on the side here with some graphite. I'm holding the pencil on its side. You can probably, yeah, holding it like that and drawing like that. Yeah, so I'm just basically putting graphite on the paper without, it's not on the picture itself, it's just off to the side. I'm using I have a tissue, you could use a paper towel, and I'm getting some of that graphite on here. So what this is, you're kind of just like filling in some space. Yeah, it is doing that weird pencil thing. I think it's okay though, because I'm gonna end up actually drawing over all of this. I'm just like filling it in with some shade. It's going to be light. It's not, oh yeah, it's totally doing the weird eraser thing. I cannot explain this. If anyone knows why, like, the science of that, someone tell me, because I don't know. I don't know if you can see it as much as I can. You can, I'm sure you can see it over there, though. So anyway, yep. What I'm doing on here, like right now, it's a paper towel. Or this is a tissue, but paper towel or tissue. Yeah, so sorry if I didn't explain that well. Yep, so on the side, or even a separate piece of paper, just scribble to get some pencil down, plop your pencil aside, grab your paper towel, pick up, like smudge it like this, and then use that smudge to fill in. Depending on what, yeah, go ahead. No, you go. You go. Oh yeah, that's a good question. I actually do, and actually white fur is a really good place to do it, especially if you have an eraser, like a skinny eraser of some sort, because what you can do, I'll show you right now on the side, but I'll show you on here too. So let's say I have something with white fur. I could actually fill in a lot of it just like that. Then what I can do, instead of using a pencil to draw all the details, not necessarily the whole thing, you kind of could play with it and decide how you want to do it, but you can actually use an eraser as your drawing device to do reductive drawing. And this, you could be, I didn't clean this very well. To clean an eraser, all you do is just erase, but should have done it better. But you could be drawing in little furs with an eraser, and it really looks good for white. So you could be doing, I would actually do the little furs last. The other thing you could do, my kneaded eraser is like super sad. It's like really dead and gross and has color in it, so I'm actually not going to use it. It would work really well for this. I'm just going to use my regular eraser, but you could also kind of use a bigger eraser to create softer lines. So I don't know if you can see that really well because it's so light, but yes. So long story short, I would do this in a white area if I had an eraser and I wanted to try this reductive drawing method. It would make, I'll find a spot to show you on here. It'll make more sense when there's like a reference point. But yes, you can do really cool stuff with reductive drawing. Hopefully that helps. I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you like around the eye on the cat. There's some like white stuff. I'll try to show you there. So anyway, toning. Yeah, that's a good question too. Like, usually I'll kind of just tone the whole thing, and actually sometimes I tone it so much that the drawing kind of goes away. So if you're going like this, if you're like just going over the whole thing, just keep in mind it might actually blend away your drawing quite a bit. So just keep that in mind. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but it definitely did that weird eraser thing where I erased hard, it left a weird imprint. That drives me crazy, but it usually goes away once I do the second layer. So this toning layer is just a base layer. It's going to basically disappear. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Um, yeah, good question. So there's a couple ways you can approach it. Um, if you wanted to, if you okay, so let's say, see how this part of this picture is super soft focus, like it's undefined, it's just kind of shades. That's something that I could do mostly just through the toning process. Another thing you can do if you want to get hardcore, you could use your blending stump and pick up some of that color, or pencil stuff, graphite, and you could start to fill it in with the blending stump. You can see that's a little darker. So let me think of how I want to word this. So you could actually be doing different values in your toning. So let's say I had an orange part and a black or a white part, and obviously in pencil the orange isn't going to be orange, but it's going to be darker than the white. So I could, if I wanted to, I could be filling in that orange. I'm just like imagining like this part's orange. I could be filling that in darker, and let's say that this little section's white. I could be leaving that whiter, or lighter. So I could be doing that with my toning. Me personally, usually I kind of just do it kind of all the same. If there's a really dark area, like a bigger area that's really dark. So on this whole picture, if I was doing the whole thing at once, maybe I would tone this side lighter and tone this side a little darker. It's just laying the groundwork for it, though. I'm going to actually be, I'll show you this now. The next step is to go back to my little list here. So I toned base layer. Base layer, I could go a little more detailed if I like that soft look. But what I'm really going to be doing now for those value range details, so lights and darks, shades and highlights, is I'm gonna layer them in kind of more in a traditional style or traditional method of drawing. So that's step 6. So toning, don't overthink it. Sometimes, like I've been saying, you don't even necessarily need to do it. I just kind of like it. Helps fill it in a little, and it makes it blendy, and yeah, I think it just sets it up good. So, but the real money maker is filling in the value with your pencil. So for the sake of putting myself on the same page as probably most of you, I'm just going to use a regular pencil. I'm sharpening it. It is a little easier to get dark shades, and it's a little bit easier to get like a really drastic value range of light to dark with drawing pencils. But honestly, like, this is totally going to get the job done. So I'll use this. Okay. I'm going to, what do I want to do here? Let's see. This is kind of like, you can kind of pick where you want to start with this. A rule of thumb is that it's very easy to make things darker. It's hard to make things lighter. If you, right off the bat, just fill something in super duper dark, even if you erase it, it's going to want to still be really dark. So my little earbuds are dying. If I suddenly am silent, tell me. Okay, so this part is kind of up to you where you want to start. I'm trying to think. I default to always starting with like the eyes or something important. I don't know. I think just because it's like that's an interesting part, I like to start there. You don't have to. Let me try to train myself out of that. I'm going to start by just filling in some of these dark and light little stripy things. So when I'm filling in just the value, so what I'm aiming for is not the detail. I am aiming for just the value range. If I was doing color pencil, it'd be a little different because the blending is pretty different. But I would be kind of doing the same thing where I would really just be focusing on getting kind of the right colors in the right spots. So I'm actually kind of winging it here. I didn't like totally draw in these little lines. And they kind of read mentally as a detail, but really if I do a kind of weird thing where I just kind of like blur my eyes, like if you're looking at like one of those like magic posters and they look like a scramble on a TV, but then if you blur your eyes in a certain way they turn into a picture. You almost kind of can do that and look at your picture and see like, oh, light and dark instead of details. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is just starting in a spot, whatever makes the most sense for you, and starting to fill in some darker things that I see are darker and things that I see are lighter. And remembering it's always easy to make something much darker. It's not so easy to make something much lighter. So I'm a kind of drawing technique, I guess, how I'm holding my pencil is different than before. So if I'm drawing, well, if I'm drawing something like this, hard line, I'm snapping the paper with my pencil basically, holding the pencil pretty upright and like drawing a very distinct line. If I'm drawing something like this, I'm actually, okay, I can hold the pencil. I don't usually actually do this, but this is a thing. You can hold the pencils really at the end. How can I do this to fit on the screen? And do kind of almost like little circles. It does work really well. I just don't usually do it. It lets you have a really light touch and loose touch, which can look really nice. I just hold it a little closer, but I do kind of hold it on its side, and I just do. It is basically little circles. It could be kind of like squigglies, scumbling, I think is maybe what that's called. You could kind of do that. Something that I try to avoid is like this, because then you end up with, like, those lines are going to be there. So I'm trying to, at first, eliminate any strong lines and just kind of fill in some shades. However, if I have a furry animal, the fur has a direction. So on this little kitty cat, it's kind of nice because you can really see the fur because it's so detailed. Like I can see like individual little hairs. The little hairs, I can perceive them as lines, and they go in this kind of direction. So I actually, while I'm not trying to show too much line, I'm not drawing like this. I'm drawing the same way, loose and light, but I'm actually kind of following that pattern of the fur. And that's going to help make things look a lot more realistic, even though this is kind of a base layer. I work in kind of layers. Even though this is a base layer that will kind of get covered up a bit, following that fur pattern is great. It's like it's going to make things work better. So if the kitty cat's really easy because the fur is really obvious which way it's going, up and down here around his eye and his nose. But if I look down here, this fur follows like the curve of his eye. So when I go to do that area, same technique, like just that loose kind of circular sort of method, but I'm following the curve of his eye. And I'm doing it kind of like willy-nilly, like you can do it more mindfully, but you don't actually really need to. So when I'm doing this, I'm keeping in mind the value. So this part right near his eye is very light. Actually, I am going to get a little pencil in there, but not too much, just like a little bit, just to have a little texture and a little shade. This part is a little darker, and there's some darker spots within it. And, if you have a pet that has like a super distinct, like one spot, like it's like kind of a personality characteristic, like you probably want to get that. But if you got like a really stripy cat or a dog with like a bunch of splotchiness, you probably don't need it to be like perfectly perfect. You can probably play around with it. And since this is like not a cat that I know, I'm just kind of filling it in. But yeah, I'm looking for those light areas and keeping them light and just doing a teeny bit of pencil, and then the darker areas I'm doing a little bit more pencil. And I will show you some stuff to do to make it look even more like detailed fur. It might be kind of tricky with the camera, but that's too close. You can hold it really still. It's hard to see it. It's a little blurry because of the camera. But you can see like the beginnings of something like a fur pattern and texture. And I will elaborate on that in a bit. I'm going to keep showing you a few different techniques for now the eye, because to me the eye is typically the focal point of a picture. Usually when you're taking a photo of someone, you want to like focus on their eyes, unless you're being very creative. So the eye is usually kind of the part that catches your eye first, so I like to pay a lot of attention to them. Okay, so keeping in mind, it's always easy to make something darker, not easy to make something lighter. I am starting to fill in the outline of the eye, so that whatever, I'm sure it has a name, like that darker skin on a cat, or I guess any animal's eye, I'm filling that in with like some level of precision that your level of precision is just like whatever you're doing. The good piece of art might be really loose and not super precise and be super beautiful, or it could be very, very, very detailed and like um, hyper realistic. Both have their qualities, and whichever, I'd say, if you are like very practiced and you're going for hyper realism, then you're just taking a super long time to do the work. Um, and if you want something to be a little bit looser and more organic, you can be a little looser in your lines. So I'm kind of falling definitely somewhere in between. Definitely not super loose, and definitely not hyper realistic. Um, so anyway, yeah, it's all about time and effort. Okay, so for that part around the eye, I kind of just filled it in carefully, and kind of on the, it's dark, but it's not all the way dark, because I'm actually going to add in some more shadow. But it's like a defined line, because, on the eye here, it is a defined line, unlike the most, where the fur is, it's looser. So it's a defined line, but then if I come over here, on this picture in particular, it starts to be blurry. It starts to go out of focus, which is cool. So I'm actually, instead of doing, like, over here I was doing more of a fur kind of pattern. Over here I'm doing it really blurry and just filling in the value. It's quite a bit darker than it is in the picture. So when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it's a little lighter than it is. I think I said that backwards. It's quite a bit lighter than it is in the picture. So that's a good thing, because I can go in and make it a little darker. That was like a bit much, but I can go in and add a bit of darkness here. And then let's get this relationship making sense between like this little corner of his eye with dark and this light. So I kind of have a first layer of pencil down right around here. Not really any detail yet though. So what I can do, and I'm going to probably do it a little darker than I would, just so you can see it. So I can use my pencil. This is darker, but it'll probably make sense on screen. So I'm changing my drawing method, and I'm doing distinct, little, erratic, and random lines. Those are what is going to help you create like a really detailed fur kind of thing. So darker spots, so like right here, kind of lines up. I have a bit of a darker spot, and I want it to show up. I want those like little pieces of fur to show up. So instead of doing this kind of drawing technique, I'm holding it a little tighter, and I'm doing just little erratic. Like the erratic is the key. Like if you're doing it like that, it's not going to look particularly natural. It could look actually really cool, but notice if you're doing that and you don't want to be doing it, and just teach yourself to be more loose. So you're just doing little jagged things, and so that's for short fur. I'm going to kind of mess this picture up and just show you over here short fur. So this is kind of not really part of the picture, and it's going to be bigger, so it's like blown up. But so here's like short fur, erratic, overlapping, going in a direction. The more you fill it in, the darker it'll be. But the more you fill it in, it might look a little more realistic, especially if you're doing quite a bit. You might actually go crazy if you do this for a whole picture, but that's why drawing this way would take a long time. So that's kind of for shorter fur. For longer fur, kind of the same thing, but longer, I want to say brush strokes, but pencil strokes. And depending on the kind of animal you have, your fur could kind of clump into little like clumps. So you could have the pieces kind of end in a bit of a V shape. I wouldn't get too crazy with that. Maybe just do that every once in a while. But longer fur, basically the same thing, but longer pencil strokes like that. Um, and the more it's filled in, the more natural it'll look. If you are getting real fancy with it, you can start to do kind of like have a bit more of a strategy to it and have like some shading. I could even bring in my, I'll do this again with some other stuff. I could bring in my pencil eraser, my like skinny eraser, and pop in some little highlights if I wanted to. It's a great thing to, it's fun, great thing to do. I don't know how much they show up on here, but anyway, I'm gonna go back over here to show you another thing quick. So on my picture, my reference picture here, this little cat who fades out on the side, that is a great zone to go in and use my blending stuff. And I'm just like kind of throwing a lot of info at you right now, just so you have it. But that's a great opportunity to use my blending stump, and I could actually blend everything in, and it picks up the pigment, or I guess it's not pigment, the graphite, and I can actually, without even getting a pencil, hopefully you can see that, I can start to do some texture with this blending stump. I can do the same thing up here if I'm doing this and I'm like, ooh, that's like too much. I want it to be a little softer. I can just go in on top and just lightly kind of blur everything like that. And then if I wanted to, let's say I went over it with the blending stump and it lost some of that highlight pop. I can go in with a skinny eraser, and if I don't have the the actual like store-bought skinny eraser, I can always just use a smaller eraser. It really honestly works pretty much just the same, especially if you can have like a fresh one and you can use the side. I can go in and add more of a highlight. So this is a really good thing to do for a light animal. Like you can use this technique a bunch, and maybe go in, have things kind of be a teensy bit darker than you want them, and go in and lighten them with that. Okay, so I'll do a part of the eye really quick just to give you some idea on that. Okay, so without a lot of time left, I'll show you how I would start with an eye. So I want to look at the value range and the little like stripy things in the eye, but the value range first. So on my cat here, I'm just going to do kind of this upper corner. On my cat here, I'm using little tiny circles, and I'm following kind of like a radial, circular kind of pattern around the whole eye. I don't necessarily want to have like these kind of furry details because the eyeball is not furry. That wouldn't make sense. So I'm doing just really lightly filling that in. I should press a little harder so you can see more. And I'm imagining, this is kind of happening, that it's a little darker on the outside and gets a little lighter on the inside. And just leaving that in. I'm only going to do this quarter. This part's darker. I just shaded it in darker. But I didn't shade it as dark as I really am going to go in the long run. So I can gradually build in that darkness. The other thing I want to do is I want to go back, and I'm pressing really hard with this pencil because it's just one, it's just one pencil. It doesn't have it doesn't give me quite as much control over the value. So I'm pressing hard, and I'm kind of adding in sort of like that really crisp line. If I wanted to bring in my darker pencil, you can see the difference there. I can bring that in. Okay, so to get this surface nice and smooth, I'm going to use my Tortillion or blending stump to smooth out the eye. And I'm going to kind of work from the outside in. And I'm going to start to do kind of like that. It's really weird to just do it in a quarter. I would do it all at once, probably, if I had the opportunity. But you know, blending it and dragging it in. And then I can bring in my pencil and start to do, you know, more of those little like weird squiggly eye thingies. And I can get really quite detailed with it if I want to. I could go in and add more highlights um, with that. Then I also want to use the tortillon on the pupil and, you know, make sure that's also nice and smooth. This little guy here is awesome for doing like, you know, like a, you know, that wet look. It's not going to show up quite as well. Um, I would do it at the very end, but you know, you could add that in and have a really nice detail. You could keep going with this and make it more and more and more and more and more detailed. I'm gonna stop and give you guys a couple, you know, a chance to at least practice some of that stuff. I definitely rushed through a lot of that, but hopefully those are all different little techniques you can apply. So yeah, be working on yours, and I'll stop you in a couple minutes, and you can do questions. And if a couple people want to share what they've done so far, we could do that. Um, Definitely don't be self-conscious if you don't have a lot done, because it's a big project to do. And ask questions. So now is a great time if you want to throw anything out there. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 And that's just to kind of like lend yourself a little self control so you don't dive in and make something like, you know, obviously there's like different levels of black. Um, yeah, I would for sure recommend just gradually building up that darkness. Yeah, and that gives you, even if it's like kind of a flat black like fur or whatever, it gives you, it still lets you make some texture if you're building it up, so you can like look closely and be like, oh wow, there's like little hairs in there kind of thing. So yeah, yes, for sure build it up over time. And I'm just, I don't want to like distract you too much, but I'm just in this little corner of the eye. I'm just continuing to add in more little squiggly detail things. Um, there could be many layers of your artwork. It can kind of be endless. And if you are doing colored pencil, if you want to try this basically the same project in colored pencil, a lot of the pencil, like the shading stuff, still applies. Like the how to hold the pencil, etc. It's the same. It's just with a colored pencil. Um, Something else, I just have a lot to say, but something else I like to kind of mention is the drawing like this using the grid and transfer technique. It really helps you get a very, very accurate drawing that has the correct proportions. But the other thing that it does, I have found, is that the, the more you do it, the better at drawing you just become in general. I don't usually, if I'm drawing something just like for myself, I don't usually use this technique, but I've noticed that since I've done it and done it a lot, I'm like my eye has become much more aware of proportion, and I can kind of do a better job of having accurate proportions just by looking at something. And I really think it's just because I've done practice this so much that my eye just sees it. So it's a good, some people, you might have someone that's like, oh, that's like cheating, this method, but it's really not. I mean, it's obviously like a very technical technique that you are putting time and effort into, and you're not like, it's like photocopying something, but you're really training your eye to see proportion in like a very advanced way when you're doing this. So it's kind of, sometimes when I taught this to students, they would get really stuck on it because they just loved this method so much, they'd always want to do it. And I wouldn't let them always do it, they need to practice different things, but it really does train the eye to work in a certain way. And you are making a very accurate picture that's like usually pretty impressive. Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left, and I'm going to be done for now. Maybe work on this a little later because I think that I turned out kind of fun. I wonder if anyone wants to show their work and do like show and tell. I'm not sure. Does anyone want to show us what they did? Aaron, can you be the guinea pig? Good. Oh, nice. And this is just a mystery cat from a book. A cameo Persian. Is this a library book? No. Okay, you would never draw lines in a library book because you're a librarian. Good. Good job. Thank you. It looks good. Smushy face. That's a smushy face cat, right? Yeah. Maybe it needs more of a frown. I don't know. Or a scowl. I don't know. Do more shading. That's the answer. More shading. Does anyone else want to show theirs? Oh yeah. Awesome. Does anyone want to show their artwork? Oh, there's one. Paula, that looks awesome. I love the eyes have a lot of expression. Oh yeah, cute. Awesome. Oh, that looks great. The little the Caitlin, the shading on yours looks really good. That's really cool. I actually good job, Caitlin's partner. That looks great too. Yeah. Amy, wait, let me see yours again. Now I'm like trying to look at them all at once. Uh-oh, hold on. My ear things died.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are great. Sweet. Good work, everyone. Yeah, so I can tell like most people aren't done. You really, I mean, you saw how far I got. I like colored in an eye. So so you shouldn't be done. If you're getting tired, take a break. Like don't try to finish this all tonight unless you're like super into it. A good tip I have for refreshing your mind, sometimes you will get kind of tunnel vision and you'll just be like staring at this one little piece of this picture forever, and you'll start to get like frustrated with it and be like, this is all wrong. What you really need to do, and I promise this actually helps a lot, you like put your picture, like prop it up so you can see it, stand up, and you can see my belly, stand up and walk away, like all the way, as far away as you can, and look at it from a distance, and you will get a much more accurate perception of what you're dealing with. And like 9.5 times out of 10, you'll be like, oh, that's really good. So stop yourself every once in a while and walk away from it, like literally physically walk away from it and look, and your tunnel vision will go away and you will be happier. And you might notice something like that's a little weird, I need to work on that, but most of the time you're like, oh yeah, that looks awesome. So that's my parting piece of advice is to walk away from it physically and take a look. And yeah. Any last like questions or anything?
I have a question.
Sure.
My dog has like white fur on white fur,
Yeah.
and it's like
It's all white.
it's like layers of
Oh,
fur
yeah.
down
Uh-huh.
there on the neck and down below, and I cannot get it to look right.
Okay.
Like I don't know how to. I mean, I was trying to do it with the eraser,
Yeah.
but
So what you might
I don't know.
do here, I'm gonna switch it to my screen share really quick. Look at, I'm like getting so good at Zoom. So what you might do, Cooper is like, honestly, Cooper is not done. Like this whole chunk of Cooper is kind of just like a blob, but it's kind of the same situation. He's white. He's a white dog. So he's kind of a pain because it's like, how do I draw white on white? You're not really gonna be doing white on white. When you translate this into a black and white photo, it's gray on white or gray on gray. So you can take some creative liberties, and if you have like a little detail that you need to happen, but you're like, it's just white, what the heck? You can change your thinking and be like, it's gray. Like there's just like some layers of gray here. So instead of trying to just like make all the same white do something, just fill it in. Just use a little shade. It's still gonna read as white as long as you don't go too dark. Yeah. So
I think I can tell my background darker too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good thing too. Like you can just play, like really just play around with it and give yourself some creative liberty to try different stuff, because what's going to happen with all of these is whenever you show this to someone, no one's going to be like holding up the original picture and comparing it. Basically, at a certain point in the game, you just need to make little adjustments to what you're doing to make it make sense when you're just looking at the picture. Like at a certain point, I am gonna like not get rid of, but I'm gonna like set aside the picture of the cat or the picture of Cooper or whatever, and I'm just gonna work on just the image, the drawing itself, to make it look right. So if it doesn't exactly match the picture at the end of the day, that's like, that's fine, because that's what you need to happen, because it's a drawing, it's not a picture. Hopefully that helps. But white on white is tricky, and like dark on dark is tricky, but just let yourself play with it and kind of fill in imaginary shades where you need to, even if they're not really, really, really there. That's a good question, though. It can be weird. And you can also do like add some shade and then use your little eraser to add in some highlights too. So that's something you can do also. You. Yeah, you bet. It is, yeah, white on white is weird. For sure. Any other last minute questions? Okay, cool. Well, great job.
Me too.
Thanks. I hope everyone had fun. I find it quite relaxing to do these. Really fun.